Hello, and welcome to another episode of Coast to Coast Sports. I'm your host, Nick Frias, and as you can tell, I've been participating in No Shave November. But we've got a lot of sports to talk about today, so let's hop right in. Joining me now is hockey expert Michael Gutnick. Michael, nice to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So there's been a lot of big news in the world of hockey over the past few weeks. First off, there was a viral video that emerged over the weekend, and it showed 7 Senators players insulting the team and Ottawa assistant coach Marty Raymond during an Uber ride in Phoenix last month. What was your initial reaction to that video, Michael?
Well, when I first saw this, I didn't know what to expect, to be honest. But looking at this team, some of the leaders from this team were, criticizing how bad Raymond's been, holding down the fort for this team. He said, Duchesne, for example, said, he hasn't paid attention in nearly 3 weeks to any of the video or, even at practice for what they're doing. So I think, just the Senators, they really, didn't know what they were talking about, and obviously, teams, trash talk, other players, coaches, but this was, taking up a next step for sure.
Yeah, it definitely was interesting to hear the Senators saying this stuff about just kind of the atmosphere in the locker room and the assistant coaches. I think an Uber driver has every right to be recording his rides, but if he's going to do something like this, he probably should be notifying the people that were in his car when the film that was going to be released is released. I feel like he shouldn't have just gone straight to the team without talking to any of the players and release this video.
Yeah, but certainly. I mean, also, and obviously the Senators, they apologize for this. Duchesne was one of the big people, to set his voice out for this. I mean, Mark Stone, the Senators saw this video, like they had footage of it before they, it was released out to the public, and they, kind of skeptical, obviously, because obviously the Uber driver, he didn't let any of the other Senators players know that they were getting filmed, and they were obviously trash talking the team while they were here in Arizona. So it definitely looks bad, but the fact that they apologize kind of, looks better, at least for them. And obviously every team goes through, they make fun of, they crack jokes about other players, coaches. So it's definitely something that they have to work on. And obviously there's the whole conflict with Uber there. So yeah, it was just kind of a mess there.
Yeah, and I think the weirdest thing about the apology for me was just that the players they had go talk to the media that day when they apologized were the team leaders, but they were not the players that were in the Uber at the time. So anyways, moving on, over the past week, the Los Angeles Kings and the Chicago Blackhawks, 2 struggling teams early into the season, fired their head coaches with the hopes to get back on track to the winning side of things. Last Sunday, the Kings let John Stevens go 13 games into his second season at the helm, and just 2 days later, the Blackhawks fired John Quenneville, who won 3 Stanley Cups and was the longest tenured head coach in the league. Were you surprised at these 2 moves? And what do you see in each of these teams too now, Michael?
I mean, I was kind of shocked to see Quenneville go. Obviously he's been there for the longest time now in the NHL. I mean, he had been, led this team to 3 Stanley Cups. But the thing with both of these teams, and the Kings and the Blackhawks, they have been really struggling this year, at the bottom of the Western Conference. And the thing with these is that both of these teams are in essentially a rebuild mode. And it all started with the front office and having to work out the head coaches, because the players, the older players weren't just contributing enough to have success now.
Yeah, I thought the Kings made the right move moving on from their head coach, and it hasn't really shown too much yet, but I don't expect it to. They're in a rebuilding mode. Getting rid of him was a helpful step, but they're going to have to continue to take steps to rebuild. The Quenneville one definitely surprised me, though, especially because I don't necessarily feel like he's the problem with the team. I think in that front office between Quenneville, Bowman, and other guys all around that front office, there's a lot of pieces that just didn't really mesh well together, and Quenneville being at the bottom of that totem pole in the front office ended up taking the short end of the stick, even though he probably wasn't the main focus of the problem here.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Quenneville is going to sign, or become a head coach, whether it's the St. Louis Blues, the Anaheim Ducks, the Oilers. He's built up such a high reputation now that he's definitely going to, be a part of the league still. It's just now, who knows? Maybe even be Seattle as the expansion team in a year or 2 from now. So, yes, that definitely surprised me, the fact that the Blackhawks, fired Joel Quenneville. But I mean, they're moving onward and upward now as they continue to rebuild through the next couple of seasons.
Yeah, and speaking of onward and upward, lastly, there's a ton of bright stars that are putting up remarkable numbers just a month into this regular season. And which player has made the biggest impact or the biggest breakout on his team for you, Michael?
Well, for me, it's Mikko Rantanen from the Colorado Avalanche. That whole top line, Gabriel Landeskog, Nathan McKinnon, they've just been, stellar. I think they're the best line in all of National Hockey League. Rantanen's leading the league with 24 points, and he's steadily improved over the last 2 seasons. And obviously he was a first-round draft pick 3 or 4 years ago, so he's definitely made a name for himself now, and especially on top of the league now, again in assists and points. So definitely a trio working out tremendously down in Denver.
Oh yeah, no, the Avalanche have got a fantastic team with Rantanen, Landeskog, McKinnon. You really can't go wrong with any of those breakout players. But that'll do it for hockey this week. Michael, thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
While the NHL season has just begun, college football's regular season is winding down. For more on one specific school's season under a new head coach, we go to college football expert Nate Smith.
Arizona State's football season has resembled that of a roller coaster. Lots of ups, lots of downs, and a whole lot of uncertainty still ahead. Most were ready to write off the Sun Devils after a disastrous start to October. ASU dropped back-to-back games at Colorado and at home versus Stanford. But the most frustrating part about those 2 losses, they were each by 1 possession. In fact, every Sun Devil loss this year has been by 1 possession. So this team can clearly hold its own in the Pac-12. After the Stanford loss, the Sun Devils responded by getting 2 huge wins over USC and number 15 ranked Utah at the time. So now, ASU is honestly in a quality position. They welcome a dreadful UCLA squad to Tempe this Saturday afternoon, then visit Oregon and U of A to end the season. Assuming ASU takes care of business over UCLA, that leaves 2 tough tests. Playing in Oregon is one of the hardest things to do in college football, against one of the top quarterback prospects in the nation, no less. And to finish up the season at U of A is no easy task. Khalil Tate has been finding his rhythm, and the Wildcats have been playing some good ball lately. It comes down to this. Win out, and the Sun Devils are Pac-12 South champions for the first time since 2013. Lose even one of these 3, and ASU ends up in a mediocre bowl game once again. If the Sun Devils pull this one off, I will officially be on the Herm train. But for now, it's either get off at the next stop or all aboard. Either way, it should be a fun ride. For Coast to Coast Sports, I'm Nate Smith reporting. Back to you, Nick.
Thanks, Nate. I can't wait to see if the Sun Devils can win their way to a Rose Bowl berth. Transitioning from the gridiron to the hardwood, I've got Matt Stolbof here with me to discuss what's going on around the NBA. Thanks for coming on, Matt.
Of course.
So with high hopes here in the desert, the Suns have struggled starting the year 2-9. Are you surprised about Phoenix's beginning to the year, Matt?
I mean, honestly, not too much. They are still a young team. Just because you have the #1 pick, you can't expect things to change just like that. What I am surprised, though, is their offensive rating. They're last in the league right now. Really struggled, really more of their veterans. We're seeing Ryan Anderson defensively and offensively not performing even to his standards. Also just Trevor Ariza's kind of struggled a little bit, not hitting as much of his threes as he used to. Josh Jackson hasn't taken that next step yet. But I do like what I'm seeing from Igor Kokoskov, the Suns head coach. The Suns do lead the league in passes right now. So there's a flow in the offense. They're kind of getting things going. And I expect bigger things later in the year, but there has to be some changes that definitely have to be fixed.
Yeah, definitely. It's a young team. They're going to have to grow into a lot of the players are going to have to grow into the NBA, especially DeAndre Ayton and even Devin Booker still. But
I mean, the one thing we're definitely seeing is Booker is a star. He's living up to the contract. He's scoring consistently. He's doing great on the pick and roll with Ayton. Has had great vision this year. I've seen some of his best passes in his entire career. So he's performing very well. I'm very excited to see if the Suns can improve throughout the year.
Yeah, so the Suns have struggled so far, but the Raptors are off to a scorching start at 11-1. Kawhi Leonard really seems to be enjoying his time so far in Toronto. What's impressed you so far the most, Matt?
Just the offense. I mean, Nick Nurse's performance, great offense. Kyle Lowry's kind of rejuvenated himself a little bit. I mean, when he signed that contract last year, 3 years, $75 million, I thought it was crazy. I was shocked that they gave him that much money. But he's performed really, really, really well so far with Kawhi. I mean, they just had great chemistry. And I think Kawhi's really liking himself in Phoenix. They're top 10 in both offense and defense right now. Their role players are playing really well. Fred VanVleet, who just got a new contract, is doing great. And their second-year guy in OG Anunoby, who's been awesome, kind of continuing what he did last year. Been great role players for them. Serge has even had some good games. Even against the Lakers in the beginning of the year, Kawhi had to sit out, and Serge just took over and scored 30-plus points. So they're having a really good year. I expect them to be the 1 seed by the end of the season. just kind of because what we've seen with the rest of the East. Most of the other teams have struggled so far, so now that they're hyped. So the Raptors doing really well. I expect things to be great throughout the season, and we'll see what happens in the playoffs.
Yeah, they were definitely a team that I was kind of skeptical of. Like, a lot of people wanted to put them as the 1 seed during the preseason. I was kind of skeptical about that, but, they've proven it so far this season that they can be a 1 seed, especially with the way the rest of the East has played out. But the LeBron and the Lakers are 5 and 6. Defense has been a main issue so far, and there are rumors already that Luke Walton may be fired. Should Laker fans be worried, Matt?
No. I'll tell you why. I think, first of all, LeBron and the Lakers had an expectation of what this year was going to be. They understood they couldn't get a max guy, so they go sign Lance Stevenson, Rajon Rondo, JaVale McGee, Michael Beasley, all to 1-year deals just to kind of, just fill in the gap, I would say. Just so the young guys don't have to jump into these big roles right away. But we're seeing good things from Lonzo Ball. Kyle Kuzma's playing really well. LeBron seems to like him a lot because Kuzma's been very successful with him. So Josh Hart's had his good game. So their young guys are doing well. And I know there's been rumors with Walton and is he going to be fired? Is LeBron not happy so far? All that stuff's going on. I think LeBron and the rest of the team understands that this is a process. And the one thing I am concerned about, if there's anything that I'm super concerned about, is their defense. They are a pretty bad defensive team. We've seen this with LeBron's teams over the years. That's the one thing that needs to be improved if in the future they want to compete with the Warriors, the Trailblazers, the Thunder, those kind of teams. We'll just have to wait and see. But if I'm a Lakers fan right now, I'm not too concerned. Playoffs or not, I really wouldn't be too worried.
Yeah, this definitely isn't the team LeBron wanted, but he's making the most of it like he did in Cleveland, and he has in the past. Definitely wouldn't be surprised if he does it again. Well, thank you for coming on, Matt.
Of course.
The NBA isn't the only basketball going on right now, though. And for more on the opening weekend of college basketball, here's our NCAA basketball expert, Alex Weiner.
Thanks, Nick. Opening night of college hoops was full of highlights, but none more eye-opening than Duke's domination over Kentucky. The Blue Devils exploded for a 118-84 victory, led by their 3 freshmen, R.J. Barrett, Cam Reddish, and Zion Williamson, who combined for 83 points, nearly as many as Kentucky's whole team. Barrett showed why he's so highly regarded with a 33-point performance, and Williamson temporarily silenced the doubters with 28 points on 11 of 13 shooting. All top 10 teams in the NCAA played on Tuesday night, 8 of which won, and the other 2, Kentucky and Michigan State, lost to other top 10 teams. Tom Izzo's Spartans fell in a hard-fought matchup against number 1 Kansas, 92-87. No other ranked schools outside the top 10 have lost yet, but that will change tonight when number 25, Washington, visits number 11, Auburn. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Alex. Now, there is one more major sport in season right now, and joining me to talk all things NFL is Jacob Lev. Jacob, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's get right down to it. The New Orleans Saints hosted the Los Angeles Rams this past weekend, pulling off an impressive 45-35 victory to take down the only remaining undefeated team in the league. So are the Saints now the best team in the NFL?
It's hard to say that they're not. They have the most explosive offense, I think, in the league, with Alvin Kamara. Mark Ingram's finally back from a suspension. They just signed Des Bryant, who I thought the Cowboys should have never released to begin with, because I still think he's a capable wide receiver in the league. And also, let's not forget, they have a top 5 wide receiver in Michael Thomas. He had over 200 yards against the Rams. He beat Marcus Peters, who I think is one of the better cornerbacks in the league. I just don't see how they aren't the best team in the league. And Drew Brees is having, I would say, a career year. And that's saying something because this career has been nothing short of spectacular.
Yeah, now don't get me wrong, I think the Saints have had a fantastic season so far, but I don't necessarily know if this one loss dethrones the Rams because they made a lot of adjustments at halftime too. They were down nearly 3 scores going into the locker rooms at halftime, and they came out, tied the game, ended up losing, but they'd also been struggling the past few weeks. I think they're kind of still working some things out with all of the firepower that team has, but assuming they figure it out by the end of the season, which I think they can and will, and when they get Aqib Talib back defensively, it's going to be a very fun NFC Championship between these two teams, assuming that they both make it that far in January.
I was going to say that, yeah, they are missing Aqib Talib. Marcus Peters, I think, is still a little hurt, too. I know he hurt his groin, I believe, a couple weeks back, still playing through it. Also, they acquired Dante Fowler during the trade deadline. He was playing, not really knowing the playbook. Wait till he, integrates into this defense. I could still see the Rams being the better team, but right now I'm going to ride the hot hand, and I'm going to take the Saints as the best team, not just in the NFC, but in the whole entire NFL right now.
Yeah, and there's really no wrong pick with either of them. But on the other hand, there are teams that have been neglected because of what the very best teams in the league have done. So in your opinion, which team has been the most under-the-radar team so far this season?
It's kind of crazy we're saying this, but the Chargers. They have had, if not, one of the better seasons so far. Phillip Rivers has over 2,000 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. We're used to hearing that Phillip Rivers is a good quarterback, but he's putting up MVP-type numbers. I'm not saying he's the front runner, but also, let's not forget, Melvin Gordon. He has finally come on. He got drafted very high a couple years back. Has been solid, but now he's finally turning it on. He's got over 500 yards rushing so far, 7 touchdowns, and averaging over 5 yards per carry. If he can maintain that, I could see this team giving the Chiefs a run for their money in the AFC West. Also, let's not forget, this defense is ranked 12th in the league. They are missing arguably their best player in Joey Bosa, who hasn't played yet. I am very excited to see what happens when he comes back, because this is already a powerful defense. Joey Bosa can only make it better.
Oh, definitely. It's hard to say that the Chargers aren't the most under-the-radar team just because no one really expected this out of them. Even if people expected them to be good, they didn't expect them to be competing for the AFC West crown,
Right.
or even competing to make it all the way to the AFC Championship. I think you could also, in the NFC, go with teams like the Falcons and the Seahawks that have kind of had injured defenses, but their offenses, I mean, a lot of people counted out Sarkisian in Atlanta, and that offense has looked like it can beat anyone, and their defense is starting to get healthy again. Russell Wilson obviously can beat anyone, and he's got Doug Baldwin back, so it's a very...
And they're finding a running game, finally. Ever since they lost Marshawn Lynch, I feel like that's been the weakest link of the team. And now with Chris Carson, Davis, and also they drafted Rashad Penny, who has yet to really play, but I still think he could be something in this league. The Seahawks are definitely a team to keep an eye on. But one more quick thing about the Chargers, their only weakness right now is a kicker. I honestly, if my offense and defense is good, I would take a bad kicker. But hopefully they signed Badgley off of their practice squad, I believe. Hopefully that could turn around their misfortunes for the past couple years, not finding a kicker.
Yeah, no, that's definitely not a bad weakness to have. Now, I gave my midseason award predictions during last week's show, and I'm curious, who do you have winning the 2 tightest races, which would be the most valuable player and the defensive player of the year?
Well, there's a lot of MVP candidates: Patrick Mahomes, Drew Brees, Jared Goff. I'm going to go Todd Gurley here. He has just been unreal this year. He's got over 800 yards rushing, 12 touchdowns, and receiving over 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. He could be breaking the record, LaDainian Tomlinson's record, I believe, for most touchdowns in the season. He could come very close to that, if not break it. Todd Gurley has just been unreal so far. And for Defensive Player of the Year, I would have said Khalil Mack, but he's been hurt. He missed the past 2 games. So I'm going to go with Aaron Donald here. Maybe when Khalil Mack gets back, he could take over. But Aaron Donald, 30 tackles and 10 sacks. That's great production. And now having Ndamukong Suh next to him, I could see him finishing with close to 20 sacks this season. But again, I would not count on Khalil Mack because his numbers before the injury, 20 tackles, 5 sacks, and 4 forced fumbles, and 1 interception. I feel like if he could come back and put back that production, I could see him taking it. But right now, Aaron Donald.
Yeah, I definitely, MVP, Todd Gurley is the front runner. It's hard to just not have him as the front runner, even with Mahomes and Brees and Goff and Rivers, a lot of these quarterbacks doing what they're doing. If you took Todd Gurley out of the Rams system, they're not the same team. I mean, I was reading something a while back, and it said that the Rams run the same single back I formation set on 97% of their plays.
And it works.
And it works because
97% of the time.
Because you don't know if they're going to hand it off to Todd Gurley. You don't know if it's going to be a play action. You don't know if they're going to run an RPO. You just don't know what's going to come out of that because you have to game plan for Todd Gurley, and that would be the definition of the most valuable player.
And that's what makes Sean McVay such, I think he's the true MVP of this team, honestly, because ever since Sean McVay took over, Jared Goff has looked like a bust, and then now he's a superstar.
with under Jeff Fisher, obviously. But I think Sean McVay is the true weapon on this team. He is the reason why the Rams are the way they are. It's nothing against Goff or Gurley, because both of them are great players. But McVay has definitely made this team scary and impossible to plan for.
Oh yeah, no, the Rams have a lot of MVPs on all sides of the ball.
Oh, yeah.
And so thank you for coming on to talk some football with me. For Jacob Lev, Alex Weiner, Matt Stolbof, Nate Smith, Michael Gutnick, and everyone working behind the scenes to make this show run, I'm Nick Frias, and we'll see you next week.